Well, there are a number of things that we want to cover in this segment. I don't know if we'll be able to get to them all, but one of them are some new documents. Well, they're not new documents, but they are documents that are newly declassified that are coming out, and this involves the Russia investigation. And so there's a lot of new information coming out on that, and we're glad to finally see some sunlight on some of this information, because it really undercuts the entire narrative that we as a country were told for over 2 years about the Russia investigation and that there was some kind of solid evidence. Remember Adam Schiff saying, you haven't seen the evidence, but I've seen the evidence, right? Because it's too highly classified for you little dummies to look at. That's the messaging. It's national security. Well, what comes out is that now when you get behind the redactions and you get the classified documents now declassified and released, you find out that they knew 100% that the investigation was false, that it was a hoax, that there was no collusion with the Russians and the Trump campaign. No conspiracy, no coordination, no collusion, no nothing. Nothing. Now, here's one of the documents that came out, which I think is very, very interesting because it's an analysis of a New York Times article. So for all of you who listen to what the New York Times has to say ever, or any of these other papers, the Washington Post and others, I mean, you really got to take this stuff with a grain of sand. Their track record is terrible. So I get sick of people telling me, well, look at this, look what's going on with the coronavirus, and you give me some New York Times article. I mean, we might want to save that, put that in the bathroom and use that for paper. I mean, that's about what that's worth.
In your hamster cage.
In the hamster cage. There you go. That's a better mental picture. Put it in the hamster cage. Anyway, it's BS. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. Obviously, I didn't think of a very pleasant way there, but it's complete BS.
If something's completely erroneous and you have to come back and say, okay, this was wrong, we made a mistake, I could stomach that a little bit more, but it's just kind of swept under the rug.
They never own up to it.
Right, exactly. So there's never that post-discussion of, hey, what did we get right?
Yeah, the New York Times never comes out and says, hey, we've looked at some of our past reporting and all this stuff was false. There was an article in the Times called Trump Campaign Aides Had Repeated Contact with Russian Intelligence. That's the headline. Trump campaign aides had repeated contact with Russian intelligence. Now, here's the claim from the article, and there's going to be a bunch of them. Here's one claim. Phone records and intercepted calls show that members of Donald J. Trump's presidential campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election, according to 4 current and former American officials. Now, Peter Strzok is, by the way, no fan of Donald Trump. If you don't remember that name, Peter Strzok was one of the lovebirds, right, who were creating the insurance policy in Andy's office, Andrew McCabe. It's been admitted that's Andrew McCabe, where they created the insurance policy that was the Russian investigation. But he took that quote I just read for you, and he made a comment on it. And this is in a memo, an internal memo that he wrote that was only just recently declassified. He said, this statement is misleading and inaccurate as written. We have not seen evidence of any individuals in contact with Russians, both government and non-governmental. That's a quote. Another quote, there is no known intel affiliation and little, if any, affiliation with the government of Russia. The FBI investigation has shown past contact between Carter Page, remember that name, Carter Page, and the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, but not during his association with the Trump campaign. Well, we all knew that Carter Page was a U.S. agent. He was assisting U.S. authorities with investigating Russian intelligence and had contact with Russian intelligence for purposes of assisting the U.S. authorities. So there was no contact during the Trump campaign. That's what Peter Strzok is saying. And believe me, if there was contact, he'd be hollering it from the rooftops. What he's trying to do here is he's trying to say, I don't know who leaked this story to the New York Times, but, you really got a lot of things wrong, and you're possibly setting us up for the big reveal, the big fail. And that's just coming true today in the summer of 2020 that we're actually finding this out. This stuff occurred back in late 2016 and early 2017. And we're just now learning about it. A lot of us knew this just because we just went with our gut. We used our common sense And we looked at all of the other evidence that is available to us, and we knew that this kind of stuff was going on. But now we're getting document after document showing us that 100% we were right, that this Russia investigation was a total hoax. Here's another claim from the New York Times article. I'm quoting again. One of the advisors picked up on the intercepted calls was Paul Manafort, who was Mr. Trump's campaign chairman for several months. Now here's Peter Strzok's response. Quote, "We are unaware of any calls with any Russian government official in which Manafort was a party." So that's just completely false. Whoever these American officials were, these 4 American officials, high-ranking American officials, have told the New York Times, well, either the New York Times completely made it up or the officials gave them bad information and it was a lie. And that's what Peter Strzok said then, and they've known this. That's what I'm saying. They knew. If Peter Strzok wrote this memo way back when, they already knew this. The FBI already knew there was no contact, no collusion, no conspiracy, nothing between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Okay, here's another one. The FBI has obtained banking and travel records. This would be related to the Russian collusion. Now, Strzok's comment, "We do not yet have detailed banking records." Here's another claim in the New York Times article. Quoting again, "Officials would not disclose many details, including what was discussed on the calls and how many of Trump's advisors were talking to the Russians," because we know it was a bunch. We just couldn't figure out exactly how many. By the way, that last part was not part of the quote. That's Morgan speaking in the guise of the person writing the quote. But here's Strzok again. Strzok's quoting, I'm quoting him, "Again, we are unaware of any Trump advisors engaging in conversations with Russian intel officials. Our coverage has not revealed contact between Russian intelligence officers and the Trump team." And it just kind of goes on and on. Now, I'm going to say there were probably, 10 or 12 different points in this article that Peter Strzok pulls out, quotes, and then writes his own little response saying, hey, this is not true. And you can go out there and find this analysis yourself. I think we've given you enough of a flavor for it. There's a lot more where that came from. It's more of the same. The point is the New York Times, knowingly or unknowingly, was lying to us. And they never came back. And what makes you think maybe it was knowingly? They never came back and corrected their story. They're not doing a big expose now of how we got it so wrong, how U.S. officials misled us so completely. They're not doing that because they weren't misled. They were part and parcel of a team to push out these negative Trump stories, create enough smoke out there so people would say, as many people have done, well, with this much smoke, there's got to be some fire somewhere. I mean, there's got to be something going on. I've had people tell me that. I mean, come on, Morgan, this particular one point that you've disproved, that's one point. But, Donald Trump would never have been where he was if he wasn't so tied in with the Russians. And I'm just going, well, wait a minute. What's the evidence for that? It doesn't make any sense to me. Could you give me one piece of evidence? Give me an example. And then you just say, look, just read the newspaper, Morgan. My goodness, there have been hundreds of articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post about this. You're obviously not very well informed, sir. This is the response I would get from people and have gotten from people. And, again, is anybody going to stop and take a minute and reevaluate how we got here? And
Morgan, you're not paying attention.
Exactly. I'm not paying enough attention.
A lie told often enough.
There you go. Becomes the truth, right? That's the old propagandist tool. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.